In the heart of a sprawling alien metropolis, nestled between twin moons that glowed like molten sapphires in the velvet sky, stood the royal palace of Zypharian, a towering citadel carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light, as if the building itself breathed. Its spires spiraled toward the heavens like frozen lightning, and its halls echoed with the hum of ancient machinery woven into the walls like veins. This was where Queen Vela of the Zinthari ruled, an empire spanning 7 solar systems, governed by grace, precision, and an obsession with cleanliness so profound it bordered on sacred ritual. She was a being of regal elegance, tall, slender, with skin the deep violet of twilight grapes and a cascade of fine, snow-white hair that shimmered like spun moonlight. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed faintly gold, capable of reading emotions in the twitch of a muscle or the flicker of a pulse. She rarely spoke to commoners, let alone beings from lesser species, but today she did something unprecedented. From her throne room, a vast chamber lined with mirrors that reflected not just images but memories, she summoned a human. Not a diplomat, not a scientist, not even a warrior, but a janitor. His name was Thaddeus P. Grindle, though most called him Grind, because he always seemed to be grinding through life one stubborn task at a time. He wasn't famous, wasn't particularly brave, and had never fired a plasma blaster or flown a starfighter. He wore a faded jumpsuit with patches on the knees, carried a worn satchel of cleaning tools, and smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and old socks. He had been plucked from Earth during a routine interstellar sanitation audit. A clerical error, really, where his name had been mistakenly included on a list of elite universal cleaners. By the time anyone realized the mistake, he was already aboard a sleek, silent transport ship hurtling towards Zypharian at speeds that made time hiccup. When Thaddeus stepped onto the palace floor, his boots squeaked against the flawlessly polished obsidian tiles, a sound so out of place it caused 3 royal guards to flinch as if shot. The air smelled of ozone and crushed orchids, and the gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making him feel floaty and uncoordinated. He adjusted his belt, cleared his throat, and tried not to gawk at the ceiling, which shifted colors like a mood ring the size of a football field. A robotic attendant with 6 arms and a voice like a singing teakettle escorted him through labyrinthine corridors lined with statues of past queens, each depicted holding a feather duster like a scepter. Finally, he was ushered into the throne room, where Queen Vela sat upon a seat forged from solidified starlight, her posture perfect, her gaze piercing. She looked down at him, not with disdain, but with the intense focus of someone examining a rare insect under glass. Then, in a voice that resonated like chimes dipped in honey, she said, "Can you please clean me, human?" Thaddeus blinked. He blinked again. Then he coughed into his elbow, convinced he'd misheard. "Beg your pardon, Your Majesty." The Queen did not repeat herself. She merely extended a long, elegant arm, her purple fingers slightly curled, as if offering herself for polishing. "I require thorough cleansing. My outer dermal layer has accumulated microscopic space dust, emotional residue from last week's diplomatic summit, and traces of fermented nebula nectar from my evening libations. It is unacceptable." Thaddeus stared. His brain, already strained by the trip through a wormhole and 2 customs checks involving mind scans and foot odor analysis, now threatened to short-circuit. "You want me to clean you?" "Affirmative," she replied, tilting her head. "You are listed in the Galactic Sanitation Registry as Class A Universal Purifier. Is this inaccurate?" "Well, I mean, I clean floors, toilets, sometimes office carpets after a bad pizza party," Thaddeus admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "I've mopped up alien spills before. Once there was this green goo from a Xyloxian ambassador that moved on its own. But I've never cleaned a person. Especially not a queen. Especially not one who looks like she's carved from royalty and thunder." Queen Vela blinked slowly, processing. "You are poetic for a janitor. And you're the first monarch who's ever asked to be wiped down like a countertop." A beat of silence passed. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen laughed, a rich, melodic sound that made the mirrors ripple and a flock of mechanical songbirds burst into spontaneous harmony. "Oh, I like you, little human. You speak without fear. Or perhaps without sense. Either way, it's refreshing." She leaned forward slightly. "Now, will you accept the task? Or must I summon the ritual scrubbing priests? They use wire brushes and chant for 6 hours. Very itchy." Thaddeus swallowed. "I'll do it." What followed was the most surreal 20 minutes of his life. He was led to a private chamber known as the Hall of Lustration, a circular room filled with floating orbs of light, bubbling pools of liquid silver, and shelves lined with tools that looked like they belonged in a wizard's bathroom. He selected what appeared to be a microfiber glove infused with nanites, tiny machines designed to remove dirt at the molecular level, and a bottle of something labeled Dew of the Morning Nebula, for delicate royal skin only. Do not ingest. Seriously. With hands trembling only slightly, he approached the queen, who had reclined on a levitating slab of smooth quartz, her white hair fanned out like a halo. Begin, she said, closing her eyes. Thaddeus took a deep breath and gently placed the glowing glove on her forearm. The moment he made contact, a jolt ran through him, not electric, but emotional. Flashes of images flooded his mind. Vela as a child, laughing in a garden of floating flowers. Vela weeping over the ashes of her planet's oldest tree. Vela dancing alone in zero gravity, spinning like a comet. He gasped and pulled back. Whoa! What was that? The dew enhances empathic conductivity, she explained calmly. You're feeling my memories. Try not to judge me for crying over a sentient turnip in 2873. It was a very good turnip. Right. Okay. No judgment. Just wiping. He continued, moving slowly up her arm, the nanite glove humming softly as it lifted invisible particles from her skin. Each touch brought another wave of emotion. Joy, sorrow, loneliness, pride. But also a strange warmth, a connection he hadn't expected. He noticed how still she became, how her breathing slowed, how the tension in her jaw melted away. For all her power, for all her grandeur, she seemed tired, burdened, as if ruling an empire meant never having a single moment to just be clean, to feel fresh, to not carry the weight of 1,000 decisions in her pores. You know, Thaddeus said after a while, on Earth, we have this thing called a shower. Simple. Hot water, soap, 5 minutes, done. No priests, no rituals, no emotional downloads. And yet, she murmured, you still feel dirty inside, don't you? He paused. Yeah, sometimes. Exactly. That's why this isn't just about hygiene. It's about release. About letting go. He nodded, understanding dawning. This wasn't just cleaning. It was therapy, ceremony, healing. By the time he reached her shoulders, word had spread. Whispers slithered through the palace like smoke. The human is cleaning the queen. With his hands. On her skin. Guards exchanged uneasy glances. Ministers clutched their data tablets tighter. The high priest of Shine nearly fainted into a potted fern. This was scandalous. Unprecedented. Possibly treasonous. And yet, no order came to stop it. The queen had spoken. The ritual was underway. Meanwhile, beyond the palace walls, trouble stirred. A rogue faction known as the Dustborn, outcasts who believed cleanliness was oppression, that grime was freedom, had been plotting for months to infiltrate Zypharian and sabotage the Great Cleansing Festival, an event held once every century where the entire planet underwent a synchronized purification. Their leader, a hulking, ash-skinned rebel named Krax, saw the queen's vulnerability as the perfect opportunity. While she's being scrubbed like a kitchen tile, he growled to his followers in a hidden bunker beneath the city's waste tunnels. We strike. We flood the purification grids with filth-core toxin. We plunge the palace into decay. And when the people see their perfect queen covered in mold and muck, they will rise. They will embrace the glorious grime. His followers cheered, waving rags soaked in engine grease like banners. They launched their assault under cover of a meteor shower, their stealth drones shaped like dust bunnies slipping past radar undetected. Back in the Hall of Lustration, Thaddeus was working on the queen's back, carefully gliding the nanite glove along her spine. The emotional waves were stronger now, memories of war, of loss, of choosing duty over love. He saw her standing over a dying star, declaring it quarantined to prevent contamination. He saw her refusing to hug her younger sister for fear of transferring bacteria. He saw her watching old home videos of her mother brushing her hair with a golden comb, something so simple, so human, that it made his chest ache. You've been doing this alone for a long time, haven't you? He asked softly. She didn't answer, but a single tear rolled down her cheek and evaporated before it could fall. He kept cleaning. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A low alarm pulsed through the walls. 3 rising tones, then silence. A robotic voice announced, "Alert! Biocontamination detected in Sector Gamma. Filth level rising. Initiate Protocol Shine." Thaddeus frowned. Protocol Shine. Before the queen could respond, the door exploded inward in a cloud of black smoke and flying gears. Through the wreckage stomped Krax, clad in armor made of recycled trash, wielding a weapon that looked like a vacuum cleaner fused with a flamethrower. Behind him poured a dozen Dustborn warriors, their faces smeared with soot, their eyes wild with revolutionary fervor. Enough of this shiny oppression. Krax bellowed, pointing his grime gun at the queen. You will no longer polish your souls while we rot in the dark. Thaddeus instinctively stepped in front of the queen, raising the nanite glove like a shield. Hey, buddy, she's getting a spa treatment here. Can't you see she's busy being spotless? Krax sneered. Foolish human. You think cleanliness brings peace? It brings control. Fear. Obedience. Look at her, she hasn't touched dirt in decades. She doesn't even know what mud feels like. She's got enough emotional baggage to fill a swamp, Thaddeus shot back. But right now, she's trying to feel better. And if a little scrubbing helps, who are you to say no? I am the voice of the forgotten, the champion of the grimy, the apostle of ASH. Great. You're basically a dirty motivational speaker. Move. Krax roared and fired. A thick, oozing stream of black sludge shot toward them. Thaddeus dove, pulling the queen off the slab just as the goo splattered across the quartz, sizzling and spreading like living mold. Alarms wailed. The room began sealing shut, but two Dustborn slipped through, swinging broom handles tipped with jagged metal. One lunged at Thaddeus, who blocked with his cleaning satchel, luckily packed with industrial-strength wipes, which exploded on impact in a cloud of citrus-scented mist that blinded the attacker. Sorry. Thaddeus yelped. That was the tropical blast formula. Not for eyes. The queen, now on her feet, raised a hand. From her fingertips shot beams of pure light that hardened the sludge into brittle crust, which shattered under her command. You dare bring filth into my sanctum, she said, her voice colder than deep space. You do not understand what cleanliness means. It is not control. It is respect. For oneself. For others. For life. Krax laughed. Respect? You exile children for dropping crumbs. You execute diplomats for sniffing without permission. You call that respect? I call it order, she said. And without order, civilization crumbles. But you wouldn't know. You live in chaos. In filth. In fear. Thaddeus looked between them, the fight raging around them, guards clashing with rebels, nanite wipes detonating, sludge bombs exploding in showers of stink. And he realized something. They were both wrong. And both right. He grabbed the bottle of dew of the morning nebula and hurled it at the floor between them. It shattered, releasing a mist that shimmered like dawn. The nanites in the air activated, swirling around everyone, connecting them. And suddenly, they weren't just seeing. They were feeling. Krax felt the queen's loneliness, the weight of leadership, the fear of failure, the desire to protect her people even if it meant sacrificing joy. And the queen felt Krax's pain, the neglect, the shame of being cast aside, the belief that worth was measured by purity. For a moment, the battle stopped. No one moved. Even the sludge seemed to pause mid-drip. Then Krax lowered his weapon. You wanted to hug your sister. The queen nodded, tears forming again. But the risk of cross-species pathogens was too high. And you, Thaddeus said, turning to Krax, you miss the smell of rain on hot pavement, don't you? Real dirt. Not this toxic junk. Krax looked down. Yeah, I do. Silence settled, fragile but real. Just then, the ceiling cracked open. Not from an explosion, but from the arrival of something far more unexpected. A massive, gentle shape descended. A colossal, whale-like creature made of translucent jelly, glowing with inner light. It was a sky manta, one of the ancient cleaners of the galaxy, drawn by the surge of emotional energy and the scent of pure dew. These beings fed on imbalance, on conflict, and they came to restore harmony. It floated above them, pulsing softly, and from its underside drifted a fine, sparkling mist that settled over everyone. Where it touched, wounds healed. Sludge vanished. Armor rusted away into flower petals. Even the air tasted cleaner, sweeter. The queen looked up in awe. They haven't visited Zypharian in 300 years. Guess they heard you needed a deep clean, Thaddeus said with a grin. The sky manta lingered, then drifted upward, disappearing into the high dome, leaving behind a sense of calm so profound it made the soul sigh. In the days that followed, changes rippled through the palace and beyond. Queen Vela issued a new decree, mandatory grime hours once a week, where citizens could get dirty, play in mud, skip showers, eat with their hands, without penalty. She also established the Office of Empathic Cleaning, appointing Thaddeus as Chief Hygiene Consultant, Honorary. He set up training programs, taught emotional sanitation techniques, and even introduced earth-style showers. They're not as fancy, but they make great date spots. Cracks, surprisingly, became the head of waste reclamation, turning trash into art and teaching former rebels how to compost with dignity. The two even collaborated on a public mural made entirely of recycled cleaning bottles, depicting a hand washing another hand, no hierarchy, just care. Thaddeus stayed on Zypharian longer than anyone expected. He got a proper uniform, still with knee patches, a tiny apartment overlooking the Crystal Gardens, and a fan club of royal maids who adored his earthy charm. He never stopped missing Earth, its chaotic weather, its messy beauty, its greasy diners. But he found something here too, purpose. Belonging. A strange kind of family. One evening, as he walked through the palace gardens with the queen, now barefoot and smiling freely, she turned to him and said, "You know, I used to believe cleanliness was perfection. Now I think, it's connection." He nodded. Yeah, maybe the point isn't to stay spotless. Maybe it's to know when to let someone wipe you down when you're feeling grimy inside. She laughed, and this time, it sounded like home. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the crystal walls, the palace itself seemed to smile. Thaddeus remained at the royal palace of Zypharian, not merely as an honored guest or ceremonial cleaner, but as something far more intimate and quietly revolutionary, a permanent caretaker of the queen's well-being. What had begun as a bizarre misunderstanding, a clerical error spiraling into interstellar absurdity, had settled into a rhythm so natural it soon seemed as if fate itself had scrubbed away every other possibility to leave only this: him, her, and the soft glow of the Hall of Lustration. Each week, without fail, Queen Vela summoned him for her purification ritual. The first few times, it was still formal, protocol observed, attendance present, silence thick with tradition. But as weeks turned to months, the guards learned to linger just outside the chamber. The attendants stopped hovering. The rituals grew longer, quieter, more personal. And Thaddeus, ever practical, ever kind, began to notice something strange. Not in the tools, not in the dew of the morning nebula, but in her. The moment his nanite-infused glove touched her skin, she would shiver, just slightly, like a leaf trembling in a breeze too gentle to name. Her breath would catch. Her glowing golden eyes would flutter closed. At first, he thought it was discomfort, perhaps an allergic reaction to the cleansing agents. He checked the labels, recalibrated the nanites, even consulted the robotic hygiene physician, who responded in rhyming couplets and suggested emotional compatibility as a variable. But when he mentioned it to the queen, she simply smiled, slow and secretive, and said, "You needn't worry, Thaddeus. It is not pain I feel. It is relief, depth, a sensation long forgotten." He didn't understand, not at first. But then came the day he reached the curve of her shoulder, where a faint scar shimmered like frost on glass, a mark from a diplomatic accident involving a rogue gravity fork. As his fingers glided over it, the nanites activated, lifting microscopic debris. Yes, but also, somehow, unlocked. The queen gasped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, as if a door inside her had creaked open after centuries of rust. Her body swayed toward him, just an inch, and a soft hum escaped her lips, low and resonant, vibrating through the room like a tuning fork struck against starlight. Thaddeus froze. "Are you okay?" She exhaled slowly, regaining her composure. "Better than okay," she whispered. "That spot. No one has touched it in 200 years. Not without gloves. Not without layers. Not without fear. And I'm just me," he said. "Yes," she said, opening her eyes. "And that is precisely why it works." From that moment on, he began to sense it. The subtle shifts in her posture. The way her breath deepened when he worked along her spine. The slight arch of her back when he reached the base of her neck. It wasn't just emotional release anymore. It was physical. Pleasurable. Intimate in a way that defied definition. Existing somewhere between healing and desire, duty and devotion. He never acted on it. Never pushed. Never assumed. He was a janitor, after all, not a lover. But he couldn't deny the electricity in the air. The warmth that bloomed beneath his touch. The way her skin seemed to thrive under his hands. One evening, during a particularly long session beneath the shifting auroras of the palace dome, she spoke without warning. "Do you know what it means to be worshipped for your purity, Thaddeus? To have millions adore you because you are flawless? To never be allowed to sweat, to itch, to need. He paused, glove hovering above her collarbone. No. But I know what it's like to feel invisible until someone needs you to fix their mess. She turned her head slightly, looking at him over her shoulder. When you clean me, I don't feel like a queen. I feel like a woman. Alive. Touched. Real. His heart thudded. He swallowed hard. I just do my job. And your job, she said softly, is to make me feel human. Even though I am not. Word spread again, this time not of scandal, but of wonder. Servants whispered that the queen's aura had brightened, that her laughter rang through the halls like wind chimes after a storm. The sky mantas returned once more, circling the palace in slow, graceful arcs, as if approving. Cracks even stopped by one day, now clean-shaven and wearing a badge that read Dirt Reimagined, and said, I've never seen her smile so much. You're not just cleaning her. You're unblocking her. Glad someone gets it, Thaddeus muttered, polishing a floor tile with unnecessary vigor. But not everyone approved. Deep within the archives of the Royal Order of Shine, a sect of elite royal cleaners who had served the Zinthari bloodline for millennia, a quiet fury brewed. Led by High Scrubber Ilix, a tall, severe alien with silver skin and eyes like frozen mercury. They viewed Thaddeus not as a healer, but as a contaminant. He is human, Ilix hissed during a secret conclave beneath the palace. A species known for shedding dead skin cells at an alarming rate, harboring bacteria in their oral cavities, and sleeping in wrinkled sheets. And he dares to lay hands upon the sacred form. He uses certified sanitation protocols, one junior scrubber dared to say. Protocols. Ilix spat. He bypasses them. He touches her directly. With emotion. With warmth. That is not purification. That is corruption. Another voice, older, wiser, murmured, or evolution. Ilix silenced them with a glare. Then we shall evolve him out of the palace. Permanently. Their plan was subtle. Elegant. Deadly. They engineered a new class of nanet. One that mimicked Thaddeus's cleaning tools but carried a hidden directive. To amplify sensory feedback to dangerous levels. If undetected, prolonged use would cause the queen to experience such intense pleasure that her nervous system would overload, triggering a neural cascade. She would appear to have died from emotional saturation, a rare but documented condition among high-empathy species. And the blame? Would fall squarely on the humans' unregulated methods. The trap was set during the Festival of Renewal, a grand event where the queen underwent a full-body purification before her people. Thousands gathered in the crystalline plaza, watching through transparent energy shields as she reclined on the slab of quartz, radiant and serene. Thaddeus stood beside her, unaware, loading a fresh nanet glove from a dispenser labeled Official Palace Issue, sterilized and sealed. He didn't notice the faint blue pulse within the fibers. He didn't see Ilix watching from the shadows, fingers steepled, lips curled. He began the ritual as always, gentle, methodical, respectful. First the arms, then the shoulders, then the delicate curve of her neck. The queen sighed, already relaxing. But as he moved to her back, something changed. Her breath hitched, then quickened. Her fingers clenched the edge of the slab. A soft moan escaped her, louder than before, trembling with intensity. Thaddeus frowned. You okay? I feel too much, she whispered. It's beautiful, but it's too much. He looked down. The nanets in the glove were glowing an unnatural shade of violet, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. His stomach dropped. This wasn't right. This wasn't safe. He tried to pull away, but the glove clung, fusing slightly to his hand. The nanets were self-replicating, feeding off the emotional resonance between them. The queen arched, crying out, not in pain, but in overwhelming sensation, her body trembling as wave after wave of pleasure crashed through her like solar flares. The crowd murmured. Guards stepped forward. Alarms blared. Thaddeus acted fast. He grabbed the bottle of dew of the morning nebula, the real one, the one he kept hidden in his satchel, laced with a neutralizing agent he developed after the last incident, and sprayed it over the glove. The liquid hissed, the nanets shrieked in microfrequency bursts, and the glove disintegrated into harmless dust. The queen gasped, her body going still, her breathing ragged but stabilizing. Silence fell. Then, from the slab, she sat up slowly, her eyes blazing gold. She looked not at Thaddeus, but at the shadows where Ilix stood. With a voice that echoed like thunder wrapped in silk, she said, "Bring forth the traitors." Guards surged forward. Ilix and the conspirators were dragged into the light, their silver skins pale with fear. "You sought to poison my trust," the queen said, rising to her feet, untouched by weakness. "You feared change. You feared feeling. But know this, cleanliness without compassion is emptiness. Purity without connection is prison. And I will no longer live in a cage of sterility." She turned to Thaddeus, still catching his breath, his hands shaking. "You saved me. Again." He shrugged, trying to smile. "Just part of the service. Extra charge for life-saving, by the way." She laughed, loud, free, joyous, and before anyone could react, she stepped forward and kissed him on the cheek, a gesture so simple, so human, that the entire plaza erupted in stunned silence, then thunderous applause. After that day, nothing was the same. The Order of Shine was reformed, not abolished, but transformed. Their rituals remained, but now included empathy training, cross-species hygiene exchange programs, and mandatory imperfection days. Ilix was reassigned to clean public restrooms on the moon of Gorthax, a punishment some said was cruel, others called poetic justice. Thaddeus became more than a cleaner. He became a symbol, a bridge, the man who touched the untouchable and made her whole. And though he never claimed titles or power, the queen ensured he lacked for nothing. His apartment grew larger. His satchel was replaced with a smart case that auto-refilled cleaning supplies. He even got a robot assistant named Bloop, whose sole function was to remind him to eat and occasionally sing motivational songs in the style of 1980s rock. Yet the most profound change was between them. Their weekly sessions continued, but now there was no pretense. No hiding. When he touched her, she felt it, deep in her bones, in her soul, in the very core of her being. It was pleasure, yes, but not mere physical delight. It was recognition, acceptance, love, perhaps, though neither dared name it. He never crossed the line, never took more than she offered. But in the quiet moments, when the palace slept and the stars burned above, they would sit together on the balcony, sipping tea made from crystallized comet dust, and talk about Earth, about Zypharian, about the strange, beautiful mess of existence. Once, she asked, "Do you ever wish for more? For grandeur? For fame?" He looked at the sky. Fame fades. Grandeur cracks. But a clean floor? A clear mind? A moment where someone feels better because you showed up and did your job? That lasts. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're the cleanest thing in my life, Thaddeus Grindle. And not because of the nanits." And so, in the heart of a palace built on perfection, something beautifully imperfect thrived, a bond forged in disinfectant and vulnerability, in courage and citrus wipes, in the quiet magic of a human hand touching a queen's skin and making her feel, at last, truly alive. Years flowed through the palace like a quiet river, carrying change in its gentle current. The Hall of Lustration, once a sacred and solemn chamber reserved only for royal purification, had slowly transformed into something softer, something warmer. Its mirrors no longer reflected just memories, but laughter, stolen glances, and the occasional dance between two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of ways. The nanit gloves still hung on the wall, but they were used less often now, not because cleanliness had fallen by the wayside, but because some kinds of purity could not be measured by dust levels or microbial counts. Thaddeus P. Grindle, once a humble janitor from Earth with a satchel full of wipes and a heart too big for his faded jumpsuit, stood at the edge of a new era, not just for himself, but for Zypharian. What began as a mistaken interstellar appointment had become a love story written in lemon-scented mist and golden glances, one that rewrote the rules of tradition, class, and even biology. It happened on the anniversary of the Festival of Renewal, the day Thaddeus had saved the Queen from the rogue nanits. The entire planet celebrated what was now known as Touch Day, a holiday dedicated to empathy, connection, and the revolutionary idea that being clean didn't mean being cold. That evening, beneath a sky streaked with the slow drift of twin auroras, Queen Vela stood before her people, radiant in a gown woven from starlight thread and living moss, a symbol of harmony between order and nature. She raised her hand, and silence fell across the vast crystal plaza. "People of Zypharian," she began, her voice clear and strong. "For centuries, we believed greatness came from perfection. From distance. From never showing weakness. But I have learned that true strength lies in trust. In touch. In allowing oneself to be seen, dust and all." A murmur of awe passed through the crowd. "And so," she continued, turning to where Thaddeus stood, hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets, face flushed violet under the glowing sky, "I ask not as your queen, but as a woman in love, if you, Thaddeus P. Grindle, would do me the honor of becoming my partner, my equal, my husband, and the first human royal of Zypharian. He stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then he grinned, that lopsided, unpolished, beautifully human grin, and said, loud enough for every sensor and ear in the kingdom to hear, "Well, I did sign up for regular maintenance." The crowd erupted. There was no long engagement. No drawn-out debate. The High Council grumbled, of course. Some traditions die hard, especially when they involve bloodlines and galactic precedent. But even they couldn't deny the truth that pulsed through the planet. The Queen had never been happier. The people had never been more united. And the sky mantas returned in droves, circling the palace in celebration, raining down shimmering spores that bloomed into flowers of light. The wedding took place under the open dome of the Grand Garden, where floating lanterns shaped like cleaning bottles bobbed in the air, releasing soft chimes with every breeze. Thaddeus wore a tailored suit made of recycled silk and cosmic linen, with knee patches embroidered in gold thread. Vela's hair was braided with vines that sang when touched, and her skin glowed with a warmth that had nothing to do with royal protocol and everything to do with joy. They exchanged vows not of power or duty, but of care. She promised to let him leave socks on the floor if he cleaned them afterward. He promised to never stop telling her the truth, even if it was messy. They sealed it not with a kiss alone, but with a ritual cleansing, each wiping the other's hands with a cloth dipped in dew of the morning nebula, a symbol of mutual care, shared vulnerability, and infinite renewal. And so, Thaddeus became King Consort Grindel, though he insisted everyone still call him Grind, and threatened to mop the throne room with anyone who didn't. Life in the palace changed in the sweetest of ways. The once sterile corridors echoed with giggles. The Hall of Lustration was repurposed into a nursery, after minor renovations, including anti-slip flooring, child-proof nanite locks, and a changing table built into the quartz slab. Because not long after the wedding, miracle upon miracle, the impossible happened. Queen Vela became pregnant. The royal physicians were stunned. Zinthari and humans were genetically incompatible, different biochemistries, different cellular structures, different evolutionary paths. It shouldn't have been possible. And yet, there it was, a heartbeat. Then 3. Then 5. Yes, 5. Thanks to the unique blending of Zinthari resilience and human adaptability, and possibly the lingering effects of the dew of the morning nebula, which, according to Bloop the robot, had emotional fertility enhancement properties, Vela gave birth to quintuplets, 3 girls and 2 boys, each a breathtaking fusion of their parents. Lumina, the eldest, had her mother's violet skin and her father's mischievous grin, with white hair that sparkled when she laughed. Kaelin had Thaddeus's freckles and Vela's golden eyes, already showing signs of empathic sensitivity. He once cried because a dust bunny looked lonely. Myra was born with the ability to hum at frequencies that calmed angry space bees. Jax had an obsession with mops and declared at 6 months old, "I will sanitize the galaxy." And little Nomi? She could clean an entire room just by clapping her hands. They grew up in a palace that smelled of lavender disinfectant and warm bread, where bedtime stories were told by robot narrators with dramatic voices, and where nap time was enforced by a fleet of tiny scrub drones shaped like bunnies. Thaddeus, now a father 10 times over, they adopted 2 more children, one from the Dustborn slums, one from a drifting orphan ship, balanced his duties with the same humility he'd always had. He still cleaned. Not because he had to, but because he loved to. Every morning, before the suns rose, he'd walk the halls, wiping fingerprints from mirrors, polishing floors, whispering encouragement to malfunctioning droids. And every evening, he'd return to the royal suite, where Vela waited, often barefoot, always smiling, her arms open. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching their children chase bioluminescent bubbles in the garden below, she rested her head on his shoulder. "You gave me everything," she said softly. "A heart, a family, a life beyond duty." He kissed the top of her head. "Nah, you had it all along. I just helped dust it off." And so, in the years that followed, the legend of King Consort Grindel spread across the stars, not as a warrior, nor a conqueror, but as the man who cleaned a queen's soul and, in doing so, taught an entire civilization that love wasn't about perfection.